My name is Wade Burleson. I speak and write for a living. If you've never read any of my dozen books or listened to any videos that I've made, I know I've got just a few brief seconds to convince you to listen to what I'm about to say. So hang in there with me, and I'm going to be dramatic at the beginning, but I hope if you watch, you'll come away with a great deal of hope for you, your family, and for our nation. I want to convince you that we're living in a day when we've got to learn what it means to live our lives not by lies, but by acknowledging God. Or, simply put, we've got to understand our children must be taught about the Creator and the laws of nature in the classroom, or we're going to lose our nation. We're going to fall. We're going to cease to exist. And already we are seeing some really dramatic things happen in our country. You know, schools now teach that we all evolved from amoebas and apes, and over billions of years, we became man. That is just absolutely absurd. That's a lie that is being taught. The truth is, man is devolving. Um, the ancients were wise and they understood civilization and architecture and reading and language. For example, Homer. You look at the Iliad and the Odyssey, all ancients spoke in poetry until prose was introduced about the 3rd century BC. And today, we can't even get kids to spell 4-letter words properly on the bathroom stall. We are devolving in terms of civilization, particularly in the United States. This photograph was taken yesterday at what they call a gay pride parade. The ancients understood that pride was the number one sin. I worked long and hard to expose child abuse in religious institutions, and we made some progress in our efforts to hold perpetrators accountable. But now we've got children watching grown men expose themselves in these gay pride parades. It just makes me absolutely sick. We are devolving as a nation. We are ruining our culture and our civilization. And you say to me, Wade, come on, Wade, don't be so dramatic. I don't want to be. But if we don't do something to turn this around, the United States of America is going to fall. You say, well, what do we do? Well, I think there is a solution on what we can do. Children are now self-identifying as animals in schools. It's happening up in Illinois. This is from an article yesterday. It's happening in Great Britain. And the advice of the British government is teachers, parents, and pupils who identify as animals, don't ridicule them. If they dress up as a cat, a dog, a pig, a rat, empower them, enable them. And I just simply say, if you think that's the solution, you have joined George Orwell's Animal Farm. You see, if there is no God in society, in education, in culture, everything is permitted. And that, in essence, is where we are right now. Let me give you some biblical wisdom. And now, for those of you who say, wait, I don't want to hear the Bible. This is why you need to watch this video. You must hear the Bible, because it is the Bible that was the foundation of our country. And I'll explain to you why. Not a religion. No. Natural philosophy, natural law. Listen to what the scripture says. It's just absolutely amazing. The vile person says there is no rule of God in the land. That's the Jewish Targum translation. The vile person says God will not punish us. Sound familiar? Does to me. We've got to ask ourselves the question, where did we go wrong? What has happened to our country? Why are we so vile? Why is there lawlessness? Why is thievery and stealing and immorality and pride something normal? Well, someone once said, he alone who owns the youth gains the future. And of course, Moms for Liberty got in trouble for using this quote, but it's an accurate quote. You see, when Adolf Hitler wanted to change his country, he began to indoctrinate the youth. And we have been in the midst of indoctrination since the 1960s. In our schools, in our education, we've taken God out of the classroom, and we are falling as a nation. So, what do we do about it? Well, because we have stopped teaching the laws of nature and of nature's God, we've got to get back to it. We've got to teach our children how our founding fathers and our founding documents all referred to the laws of nature and nature's God. It's the only way we can preserve liberty. It's the only way that we will have a continuing life as a nation. It's the only way our society will truly find happiness. It's by teaching our children what the founders understood about the God of nature and nature's God. You see, the problem with modern education is that our kids are now being indoctrinated that ancient people and ancient codes, those things that they believed in, ancient laws, the Ten Commandments, which is basically natural philosophy, or the Code of Hammurabi that the Muslims hold to, that's natural philosophy. Now, our kids are being indoctrinated, and they're being told ancients are all stupid and ignorant. And that's just not the case. For example, in schools, it is taught by many school teachers that the ancients believed the world was flat. That's just utterly ridiculous. The ancients knew that the world was round. But that's not what our kids are taught. Our kids are taught that Christopher Columbus was afraid he was going to sail off the end of the earth because that's what everybody believed. No, 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 and 1,000 times no. Stop living by lies. Isaac Newton. Our kids are taught that was the beginning of the scientific age. Isaac Newton, born Christmas Day, 1642, died March 20, 1726. Probably the greatest scientist to ever live. He's my hero. Teachers say that there was no wisdom. There was no knowledge. There was no true understanding of how the world works until Isaac Newton came on the scene. But they're wrong. In fact, Isaac Newton, who is the father of what we would call mathematics, calculus, geometry, he discovered the light prism. His wonderful book, Principia Mathematica, still is taught today in terms of the fundamental principles of geometry. Isaac Newton, who discovered gravity while he was on break during a pandemic in London from Cambridge, 1665 to 1666, and the apple fell from the tree in his garden. Isaac Newton was a genius, my hero. But most don't understand that he spent his entire life studying the Bible. I understand it. But we've got to ask ourselves the question, why? Why did he study the Bible for all of his life? Well, when he would take a break from his scientific studies and from his biblical studies. He would often study the history of the ancient kingdoms. And he wrote a tremendous book presented to the Queen called The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms. You can find it online. There's the address. I've read it at least a dozen times. And I've got to be honest, it's not an easy read because I know chronology, it's a hobby of mine, and because I know the Bible. I love it. It's my favorite book of all time. Isaac Newton wrote it, and he knew what Albert Einstein said of him. The ancients knew something which we seem to have forgotten. That's what Isaac Newton presents in his work on the ancient kingdoms. And it's what Albert Einstein also believed. In other words, the ancients were smarter than we are. We, as a people, as a culture, as a nation, are devolving, not evolving. And here's what Isaac Newton discovered about the ancient people. He called it Prisca Sapientia, which is Latin for ancient wisdom. They had it. We do not. Let me show you what Isaac Newton found in his studies of the Bible and of nature. In fact, he credits his invention of geometry for from his Bible reading. It's fascinating. This is an actual handwritten manuscript. Isaac Newton knew the ancients believed the world was a sphere. It was round. He understood they measured the world. So where does this lie that the world is flat come from? Well, this is a photo from my office that I've taken of an actual handwritten manuscript of Washington Irving, who did the biography of Christopher Columbus. And in this manuscript, handwritten manuscript, it is Washington Irving in the 1800s writing a biography of Columbus, who invented the myth that the ancients believed the world was flat. It's amazing how modern educators end up believing lies and teaching lies, and they don't study the ancients. Isaac Newton studied the ancients, and he recognized that man is a direct creation of God. That's right. We didn't evolve from amoebas and apes. No, the Creator God, He divinely created us. He reached down after creating the universe and created mankind. Now, if you say, oh, no, he didn't do that. That's just ridiculous. Well, just hang in there with me for a moment and let me show you why, if you live by the lie of evolution and you take God out of the classroom, you're going to wind up with apes on the street. We have got to understand what Isaac Newton comprehended. You see, Newton said that all of the ancient kingdoms of the world had a history of the deluge, a history of the flood. And when you read his chronology of ancient kingdoms, you find out exactly what they taught about it. And then Newton said, basically, this all comes from the descendants of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And if you look at Genesis chapter 10 and Genesis chapter 11, you will find the table of nations where the sons of Noah and their wives and their descendants spread out over the earth. And what Isaac Newton said was, when Ham went to Egypt and his grandson Mizraim, and that's the ancient word for Egypt, populated that land. Shem, the Shemites, the Semitic people, the Arabs and the Jews, they populated the Middle East. And then Japheth and his descendants, Javan, for example, the ancient word for Greece, they went to Europe and then spread out. Isaac Newton said, these ancient people were brilliant. Why? Why were they brilliant? Well, because when God created mankind, he gave to them Prisca Sapientia. He gave them wisdom. He gave them knowledge. And Newton goes on to prove this by showing how the descendants of Ham in Egypt, They built their pyramids and they built their temples. One of the oldest was the Temple of the Phoenix at Heliopolis. And this was a temple that had a disc, a monument in the middle. And then take a look at the top. Take a look, see if I can point it out right there. Take a look at that black. It's called a bin. And this, by the way, has been uncovered, and it's now in the Egyptian Museum. And this is what it looks like. And it tells a story in hieroglyphics. Out of primordial waters came the God Nu, Noah. And there are 8 gods told in this bin on top of the oldest pyramid in Egypt. And of course, when we say gods, we translate them as gods because they were later on worshipped by the people of Egypt. Future generations worshiped them, and there were 8 of them. Does that strike you as odd that there were 8 when Noah and his wife had 3 sons and their wives? The pyramids that were built, Isaac Newton examined them, and with his knowledge of geometry and calculus and algebra, he made some astonishing discoveries. There are 43,200 seconds of daylight on a hemisphere at the equinox. That means the equator. That's half the number of seconds in a 24-hour day. And when you measure out the pyramid at Giza, you will find that its measurements are beautifully constructed in terms of the geometry that Isaac Newton discovered. And in his writings, Newton said, I'm not really discovering this, I'm rediscovering what the ancients knew. Have you ever asked yourself the question, how did the ancients build the pyramids without the modern equipment that we have? In fact, each of these stones, and there are tens of thousands of them, would weigh anywhere between 1 to 90 tons. There are over 100 discovered pyramids. Some say 118. But this particular pyramid at Giza, unbelievable. When you take a look at its height, it measures exactly to the circumference of the world. So Isaac Newton says very clearly in his studies and examinations of Prisca Sapientia that the ancients understood not only the circumference of the world, they understood the circumference of the moon, and they were able to navigate. They were brilliant people because God gave to Adam wisdom passed down to Enoch, to Lamech, to Methuselah, to Noah, from Noah to his boys. And his boys, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, spread it throughout the known world. Oh my goodness. Isaac Newton measured the base of the pyramid, and it was 1 cubit tall. In fact, it was a platform upon which the pyramid at Giza was built, 1 cubit tall. And you say, I don't know what a cubit is. Well, Isaac Newton wrote an entire book on the sacred cubit. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But this is a drawing from the inside of one of the pyramids. It's called the Karnak Temple in Luxor. And I'm going to have to give you kind of a drawing back and forth here. I'll show you. Take a look right here. Oops, sorry about that. Back up. Take a look in the middle right there. That is a picture of the Semitic Ark of the Covenant, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's in an Egyptian temple. How could that be? Well, the pyramids in Egypt used the sacred cubit, just like the temple of Yahweh in Jerusalem. And so for all of Isaac Newton's life, all of his life, he studied the scriptures to determine the measurements of the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem and the ancient pyramids, because he believed that the ancients were given wisdom from God, laws from God that they were to obey. You say, what were those laws? Laws simply that went like this, very simple. They called them the laws of Noah. Love God and love your fellow man. Cultivate the earth and keep his laws. Honor God. That just simply means don't fall into idolatry. Don't fall into immorality. Honor God. Cultivate the world he's given us, and he will bless you. But if as a nation and as a people, you turn from God and you no longer honor him, and you destroy his creation, and you hate your fellow man, God will destroy you. Yep. Notice, Isaac Newton said that the ancients understood the 360-degree revolution of the earth. 7 days equals 2,520 degrees, meaning that the earth rotates 360 degrees every day. After 7 days, it's rotated 2,520 degrees. A sacred cubit, said Isaac Newton, is 25.2 inches. That is basically the fractal of 7 days. So here's what Isaac Newton believed. He believed that in the measurements of the pyramids and in the measurement of the temple in Jerusalem and in the measurements of the sacred temples of Greece, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, you had God giving to mankind divine wisdom, the measurement of time. Basically, Noah's law to his sons was honor God and love your fellow man. Don't fall into idolatry. Recognize you're accountable to the Creator, and don't encroach on other people. Don't take their lives. Live in liberty and freedom in acknowledgement of God, because the Creator is in charge of the universe. And without mass and movement, which the Creator put into motion, the mass he created, there is no time. So Isaac Newton believed that you could study the temple in Jerusalem, and you could study the pyramids at Giza, and you could, if you will, find the mind of God in terms of his purpose for the world. And we don't have time to get into it, but from pi to the fractal 3.6, which is the sacred cubit, to 360 degrees, to 7, which is the divine number, and then the number 2520, which is prominent throughout history and scripture, we see God at work in this world. In the Bible, you'll read about the cubit. The standard cubit, according to Isaac Newton in the book that he wrote, was 21.6 inches, 6 times a revolution of the earth, 3.6. A sacred cubit is 7 times 21.6, or that's 25.2 inches. So this is what is absolutely fascinating. Isaac Newton said, a nation will collapse and fall when it turns against the Lord, when God is taken out of the equation of how to live, and people begin to live by lies and immorality and idolatry. God destroys that nation. And he uses the story of Babel being destroyed by God, because Babel turned against the God of nature and nature's laws. And this story is found in Daniel chapter 5, which was one of Isaac Newton's favorite books. And you remember the finger of God appeared on the wall and wrote, Mene, Mene, Tekel Upharsin. And the prophet Daniel came in and had to interpret what that meant. And Daniel basically told the king that your nation, your kingdom is falling because of your pride. We have just read that the king of Babylon had stood on his palace and looked around and said, look what my hands have created. Look at everything that I've done. I am the master of the world. And Daniel said, O king, because of your pride, your life and your nation will be required of you. Isaac Newton said that Mene, Mene, Tekel Upharsin, or Perez, Upharsin is the root word. Perez is the root word of Upharsin. These are Babylonian measurements. Mene is 1,000, millennial, sounds familiar. Mene, millennial. Tekel, 20, 20 gerahs. Perez means to divide. It's the old Babylonian word for to divide. So Perez was a division, half of 1,000. You add those up, you get 2520. You say, wait, why did the finger of God write on the wall of the Babylonian king the number 2520? He was telling that king that his nation was coming to an end that night. And you can read the history books. You don't even have to read the Bible. And you can discover that on October the 13th, 539 BC, the very night the hand of God wrote 2520, the sacred cubit, on the wall of the Babylonian king, Cyrus, king of Persia, brought his army underneath the walls of Babylon, one of the great ancient wonders of the world. And the king of Babel was killed, and the Babylonian empire fell to the Persians. Yep. You see, what Isaac Newton is saying is simply this: God is the one in charge of time. He's the one in charge of motions, of nations, of people, and of persons. And the truth of the matter is, according to Isaac Newton, if you ever turn your back on God as a nation, your nation will be destroyed. Does that sound doom and gloom? Well, it's what the Bible teaches. Prisca Sapientia. Where there is no wisdom, a people perish. Where there is no ancient wisdom, a people perish. What is the ancient wisdom? The ancient wisdom is to know that there is a creator. He is the God of nature. Whatever you want to call him. You want to call him Yahweh because you're a Jew? You want to call him Allah because you're an Arab and use the Arabic word? You want to call him like our founders did, the God of nature? You want to call him Jesus Christ, as I do because I'm a Christian? Fine. But listen to me. When you put the 10 Commandments on the wall of a school, you're not promoting one religion. No, no, no. You are promoting your state, your nation. You are safeguarding your liberty, your life, your happiness. Why? Because these inalienable rights come from God, not government. You see, when God created the world and when he allows nations to exist, he basically says to them, you honor me and you treat your fellow man well and you have no idols before you and you follow the laws of nature and you love me and you love your fellow man. I will prosper you. But when you turn away from me, I will bring you down. Where there is no wisdom to follow God, a people perish. I want to close this video by showing you a third and final thing that I think is absolutely vital for us as a nation. We have got to come back to the place where we all realize that there is a day of accounting coming. Our time is measured by God. You know, you can Google this. You don't have to take my word for it. But you can Google, when did Isaac Newton believe judgment for the world was coming? And you will find out that he believed it would not come before the year 2060, but it would come sometime in the 21st century. Now, why is that? Because Isaac Newton understood that if people depart from ancient wisdom, they depart from God. And we are seeing this in our country. We are seeing that people are turning away from the Lord. They have forgotten what Isaac Newton discovered. He found out that the ancients understood the earth, the laws of physics, the laws of nature, that there's a creator, and that mathematics rule, because the inventor of mathematics is God. The creator of the world and the moon and the stars and the sun and the universe is God. And we've got to acknowledge him, or we will end up being a nation that collapses. So I ask you this question. Was Isaac Newton correct? Was Albert Einstein correct? Did the ancients know something which we seem to have forgotten? I think the answer is a categorical yes. Absolutely they did. They knew something that we have forgotten. What is it that they knew? What is it that they understood? What's the wisdom that was theirs? Simply this. The vile person says there is no God in the land. The vile person says God will not punish us. And if we want to continue to take our children and turn them into vile people, all we've got to do is teach them that there is no God. Because if you teach them there is no God, everything is permitted. But if you teach them there is a God, and we are accountable to him, and that we cannot live by lies, you will save your nation, your family, and your children. My heart is burdened, but I hope this video has helped you understand that if you put the 10 Commandments up in a classroom, you're not promoting a religion. You're promoting the continued existence of a state, of a nation, of a people. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.